The roar of engines coming up my long ranch driveway was the first sign something strange was about to happen. At first, I thought maybe a delivery truck had taken a wrong turn or maybe a neighbor needed help, but when I stepped out onto my porch with my coffee mug still in hand, I nearly choked on the sight. One SUV after another was pulling in, followed by minivans and sedans, headlights glinting in the morning sun, wheels crunching on the gravel like an endless parade. People in crisp suits and polished shoes stepped out, chatting excitedly, carrying clipboards, banners, even folding chairs. It looked like a convention center parking lot had relocated to my front yard. And at the very front of it all, leading the charge, was Karen, our notorious HOA president, clipboard in hand, barking orders at people like a drill sergeant. I leaned against the porch railing and watched in disbelief as she waved at cars, directed them where to park, and strutted toward my pasture as though she owned the place. My dog barked furiously at the strangers, but she didn't even flinch. She turned toward me with a big fake smile and shouted across the yard, perfect timing. "You're here. Don't worry, we'll be careful with your grass, but we'll need access to the barn for presentations. The catering trucks will be here any minute." For a moment, I just stood there in stunned silence, coffee mug halfway to my lips. I finally managed to ask, "Karen, what in the world are you doing on my ranch?" She looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question on earth. "Hosting the biggest realtor showcase this county has ever seen," she announced proudly. "I told the HOA that your land would be perfect for it. Look at all this open space, the beautiful view of the valley, everyone's going to be impressed." She spun in a little circle like a game show host unveiling a prize. My heart sank, then quickly started to boil with anger. "Karen, this is my land. Not the HOA's, not yours. Mine. You can't just decide to host 150 realtors on my property." But she waved me off with an exaggerated roll of her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. This is for the community. These realtors are going to bring in investments, developments, money for everyone's property values. You should be thanking me." Behind her, people were unloading boxes, setting up signs, and strolling across my pasture like they were on a guided tour. One guy even asked where the bathrooms were. That was the final straw. I marched down the steps and headed straight for the big metal ranch gate. I reached for the heavy chain and padlock I kept coiled nearby and pulled it shut with a loud metallic clang. The gate locked with a decisive snap that echoed across the field. A few of the guests froze and looked up. Karen spun around, eyes wide, and screeched, "What are you doing? You can't lock people in." I smirked, leaning casually against the fence. "Correction, Karen, I'm locking people out. Every single car that came in is trespassing. This is private property, and unless I see a signed lease agreement, which I know you don't have, you and your guests are here illegally." A hush fell over the crowd. Some realtors shifted uncomfortably, pulling out their glossy invitations. I could hear the murmurs. "Wait, is this not the venue? She said it was reserved. Did we just trespass?" Karen tried to salvage the mess with that smug tone of hers. "Don't listen to him," she told the crowd. "This ranch is part of the HOA. I had every right to schedule this. He's just being uncooperative." That's when I pulled out the folder I'd brought from the house, the one I'd kept handy ever since Karen started poking around my land. Inside was the deed to the property, signed, notarized, and crystal clear. I held it high so the crowd could see and shouted, "This ranch belongs to me, 100%. No HOA authority, no shared ownership. This whole event is happening without my permission. And you're all trespassing." A nervous ripple ran through the crowd. A few of the realtors immediately turned for their cars, muttering that they'd been tricked. Others looked around, clearly embarrassed. Karen's smile wavered, but she doubled down, raising her voice to fight the tide. "He's bluffing. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Just ignore him and get ready for the keynote." She tried to herd them toward the barn like sheep, but no one moved. That's when I slowly pulled out my phone, dialed 3 simple numbers, and held it up to my ear. "Hello, yes, I need police assistance. I've got about 150 trespassers on my ranch who refuse to leave." "Yes, I have the deed." My voice carried across the field like a loudspeaker. The silence that followed was deafening. Realtors started exchanging panicked glances. A few practically sprinted back to their vehicles, slamming doors and revving engines. One man holding a clipboard cursed under his breath and muttered, "I can't believe I drove 2 hours for this circus." Karen, however, wasn't backing down. She stomped her heel into the dirt and screamed, "This is my event. You can't ruin this for me." I turned and gave her a slow smile. Karen, you've ruined it for yourself. And when those squad cars pull up, you're going to have to explain to the cops why you invited 150 people onto land you don't own. I hope you've got a good story. She froze, her face paling as the weight of the situation finally hit her. Around us, engines roared to life as more guests peeled away, not wanting to be caught on the wrong side of the law. The chaos was unraveling fast, and I could already hear faint sirens in the distance. What started as Karen's grand scheme was about to collapse into one of the most humiliating HOA disasters our valley had ever seen. The sirens grew louder by the minute, and by the time the first patrol car rolled up my gravel driveway, half the realtors were already gone. The ones still lingering looked like they were regretting every second they'd spent here, shifting nervously as if they were about to get caught in something ugly. Karen, however, was still standing front and center, clipboard clutched in her hand like it was a royal scepter, her face red and twisted with rage. The first officer stepped out of the cruiser, adjusting his belt as he scanned the crowd, then turned his attention to me. "Sir, you're the one who called." I nodded, holding up the folder with my deed. "Yes, officer. This is my private ranch. None of these people were invited. This woman," I pointed at Karen, "brought about 150 realtors here without permission. They're trespassing." The officer took my documents, flipped through them briefly, then raised his eyes toward Karen. "Ma'am, what's going on here?" Karen stomped forward like she was about to give a speech. "Officer, don't let him confuse you. I organized this event through the HOA. This land is part of our community, and I reserved it for our realtor showcase weeks ago. He's just being difficult." The officer looked from her to the paperwork again, then back to her with an eyebrow raised. "According to this deed, ma'am, this land belongs solely to him. It's not HOA property. That means you and everyone else are trespassing." The silence that fell over the remaining realtors was almost painful. A few gasped. One even laughed awkwardly and muttered, "I knew this was too weird to be true." Karen's face drained of color, but instead of apologizing, she got louder. "That's impossible. The HOA governs this whole valley. He's just making a scene because he doesn't want to share. We have every right to be here." She waved her clipboard like it would magically make her argument true. The officer shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, the HOA does not have authority over this property. You can't claim land that doesn't belong to you, let alone invite over 100 people onto it. That's trespassing at best and could lead to charges of fraud, depending on what you told these guests." He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "Everyone who received an invitation here under the assumption this was an approved venue, you need to leave immediately. You're on private land." That was all it took. The remaining realtors scattered like pigeons, hustling back to their cars, slamming doors, and peeling out of the pasture as quickly as they could. Dust filled the air as a dozen vehicles tore down the driveway. Within minutes, the ranch looked deserted except for Karen, me, and the officers. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but she had nothing left to say. One of the officers crossed his arms and asked bluntly, "Did you or did you not invite these people here without permission from the property owner?" She stammered, I may have stretched the truth a little, but it was for the good of the community. Property values are down, and this showcase would have brought attention." The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, lying to people to get them onto land you don't own is not community service. It's reckless and illegal. Do you want to come down to the station and explain this to a judge?" Her eyes went wide with panic. No, it was just a misunderstanding." She turned to me then, as if I was going to bail her out. "You don't want to press charges, do you? We can work this out privately. You're making such a big deal out of nothing." I let her sweat for a moment, considering my options. I thought about all the times she'd harassed me, all the violation notices she'd left on my gate, all the HOA meetings where she tried to push her authority onto my property. Part of me wanted to press charges just to watch her face when they put her in handcuffs. But another part of me knew humiliation would sting her far worse than fines or court dates. So I smiled and said, "Not today. I think everyone here saw enough. But if you ever step foot on my ranch again, Karen, I won't hesitate to call the cops and press charges." The lead officer nodded approvingly. "That's fair. Ma'am, you heard him. This is his property. You have no legal authority here. Consider this your warning. Next time, there will be consequences." Karen's shoulders slumped, the clipboard falling limp at her side. She mumbled something about misunderstandings and, just trying to help, before slinking off toward her car. The officers watched her until she drove away, then turned back to me. "You handled this the right way," one of them said. "Document everything. People like her tend to test boundaries, but now she knows you're not bluffing." I thanked them, shook their hands, and watched as their cruisers disappeared down the road, leaving me in the quiet stillness of my ranch once more. For a few moments, I just stood there, taking in the silence, the empty field that only an hour earlier had been filled with strangers. The grass was a little trampled, but otherwise, my land was intact. I let out a long breath, relief washing over me. Karen had tried to turn my home into her grandeur spectacle, but instead, she'd turned herself into a laughingstock. By evening, word had already spread through the neighborhood. Videos of the police arriving, of realtors scattering, of Karen screaming about her rights, were circulating online. Neighbors who had been on the fence about her leadership finally saw her for what she was, a bully with no real power. The HOA board started distancing themselves from her immediately. She went from queen of the neighborhood to the butt of every joke almost overnight. In me, I went back to my porch with my coffee mug, smiling as I replayed the day in my head. The sight of Karen standing red-faced in front of cops, surrounded by a fleeing crowd, was going to keep me laughing for years. She wanted to make a name for herself by using my ranch as her stage. Instead, she made herself infamous as the woman who tried to rent out land she didn't own and got shut down in spectacular fashion. If she thought she could intimidate me or trick me into bending to her will, she learned the hard way that I was more than ready to defend my property. Out here in the valley, a man's ranch is his castle, and no HOA queen with a clipboard is ever going to change that.